Hello, world, and welcome to the maiden voyage of my podcast entitled For the Good of All with Lorenzo Chambers. I'm excited to be launching this effort, this endeavor, this adventure. I'm so excited to add my voice. I have a saying that says, "What will be your verse in the poem of life?" Remember that. I'm going to say it often. And so I'm excited to be crafting my verse in the poem of life that will begin with kind of going through my latest book, which is entitled For the Good of All and to the Harm of None. It's available on Amazon if you search books by Lorenzo Chambers, or by the title, For the Good of All and to the Harm of None. And so the first few episodes, several episodes, will be kind of ideas from chapters in the book that I want to discuss and share, and hopefully motivate you to do something for the good of all. And then we'll branch off into some other ideas, but also I'm going to add some current event type stuff throughout the various episodes. So as I launch this and you journey with me, also I want you all to launch your own journeys, whatever your verse in the poem of life is going to be, and get started. The best thing you can do, or I can advise, is to just get started. I have some friends, for example, who want to write. Obviously, I'm a writer. I have a couple of books, and I come across people and they're like, yeah, I have a book. I firmly believe I have an idea for a book and they want to write, but they don't know how to get started. I firmly believe that we all have a book inside of us, and I think it's important to just get started, start writing. And so before I kind of get into the beginning of this book, the whole social media thing is new to me in terms of advertising and marketing and this idea of like and subscribe. So I feel like that's part of the process. And so my YouTube channel is at Lorenzo Chambers Podcast. So again, at Lorenzo Chambers Podcast. Hopefully I'm going to get like these episodes edited so there'll be like a scroll or a tagline so you guys can remember this and write some of this stuff down. On Instagram, it's Lorenzo for the good, the number 4. Lorenzo, the number 4, the good. And TikTok is at Lorenzo for the good. Again, the number 4, Lorenzo for the good. So those are my social media platforms. I don't know if platforms is the right word, but we're going with that for now. And then I'm about to launch my website, which is LC, the number 4, thegoodofall.com. LC, obviously, my initials, Lorenzo Chambers, the number 4, thegoodofall.com. So that's that piece. And let's ride together. I wanted to begin by just reading some excerpts from the book and talking about some different things. And then today, a little teaser, I'm going to end with some of my thoughts around Jeff Bezos hosting the Met Gala. But let me begin about the book. I dedicate this book to the generations that will follow, that of my grandchildren and beyond, because any sustainable change requires the vision beyond generations and lifetimes to come. I've come to accept that mankind in its current iteration is still savage in nature, and that the evolution process is long. As of the year 2021, Black Americans have spent more years in slavery than being free. As of the year 2021, Black Americans have spent more years in slavery than being free. Let that sit in your spirit for a minute. Let it marinate. Do the math. The first enslaved Africans arrived in Virginia in 1619. Slavery ended in 1865. If my calculations are correct, that is 246 years. 1865 to 2021 is 156 years. And some people have the nerve to suggest that Black people get over it because slavery was a long time ago. I think not. And as much as we have advanced as human beings in terms of races and nationalities, We still kill one another because we see one another as belonging to different tribes within the social construct of race. When we look around each other and then in the news and all the things that are happening in terms of pandemics and floods and natural disasters, it would have us believe, or at least consider, that mankind is fast approaching its end of days scenario. I choose not to believe that, because my hope is that we will be able to accept the facts that define us. And in doing so, we reimagine what we can become and remember who we are as human beings. This book is but a rock skipped upon the pond of life, purposed to create a ripple. I thought that was pretty cool. If you write something and then, this was written, 2026? I think I wrote this or published it in 2020. I don't remember, maybe 21, who knows? But getting back to it's pretty cool looking at it. And then I wrote, until the process of every human being begins with the identification that we are all human beings first, and second, we are affiliated with our tribe or ethnic heritages, there will always be oppression and inequities among us. So the big idea beyond this book that frames the podcast is the idea of being open-minded, exchanging ideas, taking public learning stances, exploring facts, being able to shift paradigms so that we start making decisions that are for the good of all, or at least the most of us, right? And I think I studied in school, it's utilitarianism, like what's good for the most people type of idea. Obviously, it's nirvana or, some mythical place where everybody makes decisions that are the good of all the time. But if we can get to making decisions that are in the best interests of the most people, I think life would be better for all of us. And so I also wrote that I am willing to be transparent to myself and towards others of what I may know or not know. I am willing to learn and share with others with the understanding that doing so creates a vulnerable space for me and those engaged with me. And so that's kind of like part of my mantra. I think it should be all about mantras or mantra. And so just something to think about. How transparent are we in our conversations, in our endeavors? How do we move? Some people would say, standing 10 toes down, standing on business. I think it all kind of resonates from some of the same ideas. Not just in the book, but in a lot of conversations. And I want to have meaningful conversations. I think, and meaningful, I mean that results in something that resonates with our spirit, something that moves us to action. And as a recently retired educator, I like to work with protocols. And so I'm going to use what's known as the 4A's protocol, which basically is the idea of, as a result of conversations, reading, life experiences, there's something that we're going to aspire to, right? So that's one of the A's. Another one is something that we agree with, right? I think that's super important. Those are easy. I think the third A is something that we may argue with or about. And when I say argue, I don't mean being disagreeable for the sake of being disagreeable, or arguing for the sake of arguing, or debating for the sake of debating, but genuine, I don't agree, I want to have a conversation. Hopefully we can, come to a compromise. We need to be open to change our minds as well. And I think that's a challenge for the world, right? And then I'm going to say the United States in particular. I think a lot of the world is doing a lot better than us. But I'm here in the United States, and I think that's the lens that I'm looking at. So aspire, agree, argue, and the last would be assume, right? So there's some things that I may assume based on life experiences. There's some things that you may assume. Some assumptions are good assumptions, but not all assumptions are good. And so that's the flow and the vibe that I aspire to live in. And so I hope that we will move through these conversations and episodes as we journey together and be open-minded to learn. I mean, just a curiosity about learning is going to be super important. In reading the book, the idea of being open-minded means that you are compelled to take a learning stance. Taking a learning stance is probably the most challenging and most difficult because people typically have a fear of having their beliefs challenged. I think that's the biggest fear, right? Like if you've been, 10 toes down with certain beliefs and ideas since you were 7 years old and now you're 40, that could be nerve-wracking and it can shatter your world. Fear of the unknown is the most likely culprit. Add that to your paradigm of reality and the fact that most likely it will shift or at the very least be threatened. Someone with less than a strong constitution may give in to the fear of learning because it is uncomfortable. And, I have a saying, those people who know me, it's important to try to find some comfort in uncomfortable places, right? So, I'm a ton of sayings, right? Everybody wants to build sandcastles, but no one wants to play in the mud. So trying to get uncomfortable in uncomfortable places is a big idea. The alternative, right? Becoming comfortable in uncomfortable places. You may find it to be interesting and exciting. Taking a learning stance is the adventure that lays in the pursuit of the unknown. This is where change begins, or at least initiated. It is the entry point to being a change agent. And so I'm excited about this journey. I also liken it to, when you watch a movie and it takes you on a journey, right? It makes you uncomfortable. Like that's what makes a good movie, all the emotions that it elicits from you, right? I think that's important. Secondly, most of these podcasts I think are going to come in 3 phases or 3 parts of the episode. And so the second part that I want to talk to you about was this idea of existentialism. And it seems appropriate because if you recall earlier in this episode, I talked about the idea of end of days scenarios for humanity and this idea of life, right? And what threatens that life. And so, I've heard this word existentialism forever, going back to college. And, sometimes you don't know the meaning of a vocabulary word, but you don't want to act like you don't know the meaning because everyone around you seems like they know the meaning. But at the end of the day, it behooves you and it is in your best interest to figure out and learn what words mean without any shame. I think that's important. And so, I looked at the definition several times, and a working definition for me is a way of thinking that focuses on what it means for people to exist. It is a philosophical movement, the premise that people must make choices about their life while knowing they are mortal is what existentialism is all about. And it was existentialism. This philosophical movement was created by Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. I guess he lived from 1813 to 1855. And this phrase resonates with me, or the phrase that resonates with me within the definition is that people make choices about their life while knowing they are mortal. I think that's important. And so the age-old question has been, what would you do or how would you live your life if you knew that you were going to die tomorrow? Sometimes I think it escapes us that we are not meant to stay here on Earth and that eventually we shall go another way and leave the planet. As Bob Marley once said, everyone wants to go to heaven, no one wants to die. Knowing that you are mortal, how would you live your life? And I think that question is for all of us. Obviously, I'm older now, and as we get older, I guess we start thinking about these things, but that's not true. I think I've thought about these things from my teenage years as I experienced friends and family and loved ones, dying, getting murdered at young ages. And so, to be 16, 17 years old and you're, friend, gets stabbed to death or shot to death, and you're going to funerals for, teenagers, that would change your mind, or at least your perspective in terms of, what is a life's value? What does tomorrow bring, and how would I want to live my life? So I think the blessing and the curse for me was having those experiences young. I think that's a curse, definitely. But the blessing is I think I learned that I wanted to live a meaningful life along the way. And I think a lot of young people who have goals and ambitions and who are successful and who have mentors, I think they think about that as well. And so the big idea becomes legacy. When I think about the meaning of existentialism and its connection to a philanthropic mindset, I am moved to think that it is a philosophy or a way of life of thinking that must be addressed as we live. And so you're going to hear this phrase, a philanthropic mindset, the idea of philanthropy throughout just the messaging of this book, but throughout all of the things that I talk about, because I would like to think that I have a philanthropic mindset in that the idea is to engage in behaviors, to endeavors that advance the well-being of humanity. And that could be done from different perspectives and lenses. And so a very simple example of that would be a sanitation worker. On the surface is sanitation work, you're picking up garbage, whatever, right? Whatever image we have of sanitation workers. But at the deep level, the best sanitation workers realize that they are engaged in endeavors that support and advance the well-being of society and community, because without them, we would die of disease. I mean, let's just, and it also harkens back to, at least what my mom told me. I'm hoping that someone in your life, when you were growing up, told you, whatever you're gonna do, be the best at it, right? If you're gonna be the best street sweeper, the best cook, the best whatever, do it to the best of your ability, because it has impact on everyone, and the advancement or the decay of humanity. Yeah, and I think that too many people are involved in the decay. So I'm going to talk about, being philanthropic and it's in your mindset. I think that's going to be important. So as we consider this idea of existentialism, the pressing question becomes, since one day I will leave this planet, what do I believe happens after I leave the planet? I is we, it's us. The idea of heaven or hell or life after this life, and what matters after I die, if anything matters at all, right? And how would I be remembered if I am remembered at all? The answers to these questions give us a reason and purpose or intention with regard to how we live. Or in the absence of all of the above, maybe we live reckless, unintentional lives, because what does anything really mean? And I think a lot of people are in that space. At the end of the day, examining your life choices from the perspective that one day it ends can be incentive enough to change how you live and how we treat one another as human beings. Let's face it, most of us are who we are to a large extent due to the adults in our lives who taught us their ways of life, their rituals, their norms, their culture, and their expectations. Included in all of this, especially in America, have been the isms: racism, sexism, ageism. Ultimately, it has boiled down to the haves and the have-nots. And the haves get to decide who is worthy of having certain resources, how much and how we share our resources. They get to define the idea of human being. This is the premise of white supremacy in America. How have we come to a place where all human beings are not treated equally, and there is an idea that certain human beings are subhuman? Why do we rationalize behaviors to legitimize the oppression of other human beings? The challenge is, how do we undo the conditioning and the programming that has been instilled in all of us since birth and is constantly reinforced by media and propaganda, oftentimes by the very people whom we respect and or grew up loving and look up to as role models. I'm sure that many of us, I'll speak for myself, we've been disappointed, brokenhearted, by the people who are close to us and who should be guiding us, which begs the question, are they aware of their own mortality or do they care? But as we grow into adulthood, there comes a time when we need to take responsibility for our own actions. And it is no longer an excuse to say, well, that's how my mama raised me, or that's how my people are, and that's why I am the way I am. You have to be able to fight through that and rage against that in order to grow and evolve. The idea of existentialism is a gateway to begin to undo the programming. I invite you to do so through the journey of these episodes. Whether it is human nature or a nurtured idea, all of us want to be remembered or to have some sense of immortality. The irony is that we live mortal lives wanting to be mortal. What remains is the only way to become immortal is to live within the memory of those who came after us, our loved ones, our children, our grandchildren, and their children's children. So I'm going to stop the For the Good of All excerpts from the book. Please go out and check it out. I'm going to be probably doing some book clubs and have some conversations around that, especially as I develop the website. And there's going to be opportunities for people to become members of the website, to have exclusive access to content, one-on-one meetings, small group meetings, in person, over the media and technology. I'm excited about all of that. So I'm gonna end this segment kind of talking about Jeff Bezos and the Met Gala. Obviously, I'm a New Yorker born and raised. The Met Gala has been a staple forever. And it's always been, so at first I was like, well, why the big deal? I mean, it's always been crazy fashion, ridiculous costs. And so that was nothing new to me. I was never really a Met Gala guy, but it's in the news, right? It's current events. But also I understood that they a lot of the money, or at least some of the money raised from the Met Gala, goes to worthy causes. It goes to their idea, they meaning the wealthy, to their idea of philanthropy, which is not necessarily my idea, at least not at the deepest levels. But this year seemed to be a bit different. And it's Jeff Bezos was the X factor, right? So my understanding is that he, to sponsor it, as the title sponsor, he committed $10 million to the event. Yeah, let that sit, right? So $10 million, I'm like, all right, he's a billionaire, he has $10 million, what's the big deal? But then when you kind of look at it further, part of it, he's the Amazon guy, and Amazon, the labor force is being challenged, concerns that workers are not being treated fairly, layoffs, long, what do you call those? When it's your time to work, I'm forgetting the word, shifts, right? Long shifts that endanger the welfare of not only the people, like the drivers or whomever, but obviously other people, fair wages. And so when I heard that part, that resonated with me, the whole idea of, it's the let them eat cake mentality. I'm like, my guy, Jeff Bezos, you're a billionaire and you can't, in my opinion, no one who works for Amazon should be pressed. They should be like, we love Amazon. Health benefits, time off, profit sharing, all of that, right? And for there to be the optics that it is not that is a challenge. And so then at the next level, right, for me, the question becomes, well, who went to the Met Gala, right? All the different celebrities and why. And again, I think at some point you have to stand on business. You have to let your position be known. And I think that happens often through your actions. And I'm gonna say that all the celebrities who went, they let me know where they stand. And I think that's unfortunate, because the collective power of these influential, wealthy people could change the tide of the world overnight. But they choose to use their power, influence, and wealth for self-indulgence, and that's not cool, right? By any measure. And so now it begs the question for me: how do I interact, if at all, with the celebrities who went, right? And I don't want to name call at this point, but I think the challenge is for all of us when these type of events happen, and we have to consider, how does that help the majority of the people, right? And if it doesn't, what are we going to do in our own special way? So, for example, if there were musicians, right, or musical artists who attended, and you were surprised by their attendance and you don't want to rock with them anymore, then don't listen to their music, don't buy their music, right? And so that goes on and on to different, fields of endeavor, right? Whether there were business people, etc. The personal challenge, though, is this idea of sometimes, are you too big to fail? So, and I'm saying that to say, because I'm an Amazon guy, right? Like I use Amazon all the time, almost for everything. And so what does that say about me in terms of how do I protest the fact that Jeff Bezos was the sponsor at $10 million while, people are hurting? And so I guess, barring not purchasing items from Amazon, which I'm not prepared to do, I think the next level for me is the celebrities and artists who attended, that I'm not going to support, right? So if you were an actor and you went, I'm probably not going to go see your movies anymore. So I think that the pressure, the financial pressure, and how you spend your time are the two ways that we can all impact change. So with that, I'm going to leave you with two of my mantras. One is, may the universe continue to conspire on your behalf. And please always, as always, consider what would be your verse in the poem of life.